Please welcome Larry Ellison and Sir John Bell to the stage.
Okay, I have a request. Could someone turn the lights down just a little bit so I can see? There are people there, okay? Just making sure. Hi, John.
Larry, great to see you. Thanks for flying in for this. It should be fun, actually.
No, this should be great. Doctor, you had to fly further than I did.
That's right. So I've just had a couple of days at this meeting, Larry, and the meetings I go to tend to be genomics and immunology. I don't often go to tech meetings. But I have to say, it's been pretty exhilarating because I think what Oracle's put together here is really a remarkable, and it gives us a sense, I think, of what the future of healthcare is likely to be, and it's been really fun talking and meeting people and seeing how they have put this thing together. So, many congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
So one of the things that, a question that immediately comes to mind is, you built over many years what is the leading database company in the world, for sure. And you had all kinds of opportunities to go right or to go left, to do this application or that application. And you chose to really push into the healthcare space. It'd be really interesting to know why you made that choice and how you made it.
Well, it's the only big problem. Elon left us. So space was gone. Clean power generation electric vehicles were gone. So what is there? Oh yeah, medicine. That's really complicated. It's really complicated. It's really important. And I'm only half joking about that. But in terms of picking and buying Cerner, one of the things that we looked at was, as Oracle grows up, as Oracle matures as a company, and just running the engineering teams at Oracle, which I've done since the beginning, the difference between projects that are mission-based and projects that are, if you will, economic competition-based. We want to beat the competition versus, no, in fact, we wish there was more competition. We wish there were better systems out there. Medicine was not as far as advanced as, let's say, the credit card business. There's a global database for credit with everyone's credit information that allows you to have credit cards, and I can fly to wherever, Saudi Arabia, London, Moscow, Beijing, and walk into a store and hand down a little rectangular piece of plastic, and they can check in a couple of seconds whether I'm creditworthy or not and whether I can get that, because there's a global database. However, if I'm in London and, the terrible thing, you guys drive on the wrong side of the street, so I step off the curb, I look in the wrong direction, this is really bad. I get hit by, let's hope, a very small, like a smart car. I don't want to get hit by one of those double-decker buses, but because you don't need my medical records at all. But I get hit by a smart car. I'm injured. You take me to the hospital, and of course you want to know, what is my blood type? What am I allergic to? What medications am I on? Well, you know nothing about me. Well, that's not really fair. You know that I can pay the bill. You can look at my credit card and immediately determine that I can afford care. But what care? There's no system that keeps track of our medical records in a single place that anyone can find in an emergency. But I can immediately find all of your credit history and exactly on your credit limits, all the information about you. What does that say about our priorities as a civilization? Shopping's more important than the lives of our family. It's really kind of bizarre. So it's a problem. I've talked about this problem for a very, very long time. But talking about it and doing something about it are very different. So we decided that it would be good for Oracle to take on such a mission. And we thought we thought we actually had the right technology. We were equipped to actually solve this problem. I really do mean absolutely solve the problem. Certainly the problem I just mentioned, where if you are in a case of an emergency, all of your medical records are immediately available. We know we can solve that problem. So if we can, we must. So that's why we did it. Also, it was one of those, like cars with Elon, he can do something that's very valuable for the environment, something everyone thinks is an important mission, clean energy, clean automobiles, but he can do well while doing good. There's also an economic incentive in it for Tesla and his people who are working on the problem. So Oracle got a mission, Oracle got a chance to deploy the most advanced technology in pursuit of solving a bunch of medical and healthcare problems, healthcare systems problems. And there was the emotional reward of making the world a better place. But also, all the people that are working on this are going to be handsomely rewarded should we be as successful as I think we will be.
But I think that's a key issue, and that is when people get up in the morning, they like to come and address a mission that makes a difference.
Yeah.
And, they like to make a decent living, but they also like to have a commitment to something that will help humanity.
Absolutely. I mean, we're all looking for a purpose, right?
Exactly.
I mean, at a certain stage in our careers, we're all looking for a purpose, including individuals and companies.
Yeah.
And this has given Oracle a mission and given me and others at Oracle a purpose. And I think there is nothing more important than that. Freud said there are two things important in life: love and work, not necessarily in that order.
So you and I were chatting a few weeks ago when you were at Oxford. And you said to me, you said, JB, we've got to be a bit careful because Elon's already done electric vehicles, and he's done space, and he's done satellites.
Yeah, we can't do that.
You better get going, maybe, because there's going to be nothing left.
Yeah.
So I said to you, well, how about curing cancer? How will that go?
That's a big one. That's a big one. He's not working on that.
No, that's right, exactly.
But it sounds, okay, so it sounds crazy, curing cancer. You say the statement, because we've been trying for a while. That's true, we have been trying for a while. But the state of technology today gives us the third generation gene sequencers, mRNA technology, the diagnostics, looking at DNA fragments, tumor DNA fragments in the blood for early diagnosis of cancer, being able to use the immunotherapy seems to be the holy grail, if you will, in dealing with cancer. Yeah. We just have to flip the immune system on and target it towards those tumors. And we think all those technologies are now available. So the timing is really good for pursuing that with a reasonable chance of being successful.
Yeah, and I think to get back to your original point, we've been building large data sets of one sort or another, but hooking them up around individual patient issues and understanding in more detail why this person got colorectal cancer and that person got prostate cancer, and understanding the elements that have come together to do that. You'll only achieve that if you can get substantial data in the right databases, use AI to interrogate that.
Absolutely.
So I think it's interesting because the answers may already be there. We just haven't winkled them out.
Well, I think the answers are there,
Yeah.
Especially now with the new gene sequencers.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we think we've been sequencing genomes for a long time, but what do we mean exactly by sequencing genomes? We mean getting the base pair sequences. Yeah. But there's a lot more in the genome than a bunch of base pairs in a row. The methylation of the DNA molecule has a lot of the control sequences of the DNA molecule, and the epigenetic changes, the changes over a lifetime of that methylation, is really the story of our lives and how it changes. And we've really never measured that. We've never gathered that data. Yeah. And now we have the tools with the modern third-generation gene sequencers. We can gather that data. We have the omics data is much more comprehensive than we've taken advantage of because our sensors were too primitive. The gene sequencers were too primitive. That's no longer the case. So we can gather the data, and then we have this incredible tool over here called AI, which looks for patterns and that's what it does. It looks for patterns in the data and anomalies in the data, and can help us interpret that story of life. And it will allow us to deal with an awful lot of diseases of aging with the epigenetic exchanges as we understand it better. And an awful lot of diseases, if you will, are diseases of aging, which cancer is so much more prevalent as we get older.
Well, I think it reinforces the idea that almost all of these scientific domains, and health is one, but of course there's others in plant sciences and green energy, they have to be underpinned with the capabilities of AI at the front edge. Otherwise, you won't be competing with the best folks because everybody's looking for that, and I think it's a crucial piece of the puzzle. You were really fast, though. I have to say, first of all, I'd really be interested to know why you pivoted to buy the Cerner system. And having done that, because you could have said, well, forget all that, we'll build our own.
Right.
Or you could have said, well, why don't we just fix it? We know it's not perfect, so why don't we fix it? Or what you chose to do, which is say, actually, guys, let's just rebuild the bloody thing. Right. So tell us how you thought your way through that, because it's quite an interesting question.
Well, I think it was a sense of urgency that having a lot of customers in place already gave us a huge advantage. Cerner is deployed in most of the hospitals in the UK, for example.
It is, yeah. 80%. Yeah.
So we have the ability now. But Cerner itself automated a hospital, or at most maybe a small group of hospitals, and that's not what we wanted to do. We wanted to put all of the data in all the patient data. All of my patient data should be in a single database. If I went to 5 different, 2 clinics, 3 hospitals, 5 laboratories, 2 private practice physicians, my data is fragmented in many different places. Now, that should never be the case. My credit data is not fragmented, even though I might bank at 5 different banks. That's all been unified. So we have to unify all of that healthcare data. So all my data is in a single place. The story of my life, the healthcare story of my life is in a single place. That should be the case with everyone's healthcare data. And in a place like the UK now, we can take all of these separate Cerner systems, we are in the process of doing and of almost completed, taking all of that separate data and putting it into a single UK database. And this handles some very simple but very serious problems. Let's say, I lived in the UK for pretty much the last 4 months, and just recently came back to the States. But there's an article every day about the waiting lists at the NIH.
Yeah.
But the waiting list is very interesting because it's a patient waiting to see a particular doctor at a particular hospital. Well, and does anyone ask the question, well, is there another doctor with similar experience that can see this patient not in 6 weeks, but the following day? And of course there is, but you can't find them because no one looks. No one looks at the schedules for all the doctors in the UK and see if there's an opening, there's an appropriate opening for this patient. If you're willing to drive an extra 45 minutes, you can see the doctor tomorrow versus you can see the doctor 6 weeks from now. The data is fragmented. There's no scheduling system that does that. We're doing that. We are doing all of that. We'll do it for the entire UK, and we'll make sure that if you're seeing Dr. A with the following set of skills, because you're a diabetic, that if we recommend you see Dr. B 45 minutes further away, Dr. B will have all the appropriate skills to treat you and will deliver to Dr. B before you get there a summary and a history, your health history, and all the data the doctor needs to meet with you. And by the way, when you do meet with the doctor, the AI system that we built listens to the consultation between you and the doctor. And if the doctor orders a prescription, the prescription is automatically, a draft of the prescription is automatically generated. If the doctor gives orders, checking you out of the hospital, or having you, or sending you, in order to send you to, for a couple of lab tests before you leave, those orders are automatically captured in draft form. If the doctor has recognized there's been some disease progression, with your diabetes, that will automatically be entered into the electronic health record. The doctor won't do any of that. But the AI system will create all of these drafts, draft prescriptions, draft orders, all the draft to the EHR. The doctor simply has to look at the draft and approve it, which rather than taking 20 minutes takes about 1 minute. So the doctor isn't spending a lot of time documenting every meeting with a patient. The AI system pretty much does that. Instead, the doctor is focusing on the patient and spending more time with patients and spending more time making clinical decisions. One last thing. It's really not a classical EHR system in that the system itself is more like a care information system. So if you're looking for, it will look for patients with similar symptoms and similar backgrounds, whether it's genomics, similar genomic signature, similar phenotype, all of this stuff, and it will search all the literature and all the electronic health records and inform that doctor that other doctors have had success treating similar patients in the following way. So it's very close to giving care advice, which we don't do. But it will provide information to doctors, where information from other doctors and recent clinical trials and recent articles in the New England Journal of Medicine and Lancet of what seems to be a very successful set of therapeutics for people in similar circumstances, and it will provide that information to the doctor. So, if you're in a community hospital in an Indian reservation in Wind River, Wyoming, I think. In Wind River, Wyoming, you will get the same information and have the same information at your fingertips as a doc at Mayo Clinic. So it gives doctors much better information, and they can drill down and they can see this was the success. They can see that there was a supporting article in the New England Journal, a Pfizer article that came out, or a Novo Nordisk article about Ozempic, about what you're prescribing. It will provide all that foundational information that underlies, if you will, the therapeutics that seem to be successful under these circumstances. All of that's immediately available to the doctor. So instead of the EHR system being a documentation system that creates a burden on the doctor to actually type in the EHR changes, instead it's helping you make clinical decisions with the latest information. So the doctors are more informed, are making better decisions, and patients are getting better outcomes. And the documentation burden is completely eliminated. The interface, and I'll stop with this one, the interface to the system is not typing away and having menus. If you want to pull up someone's x-rays, you say the following: show me Larry Ellison's most recent x-rays. Actually, you say Oracle, show me Larry Ellison's most recent x-rays. But you speak to the system. You speak to it. When you show up at the system looks at you. You don't log in. The system looks at you and says, "Hello, Dr. Bell, what can I do for you today?" It recognizes you. The authentication is biometric. We're getting rid of all passwords. By sometime next year, you will not be able to use a password to log into any Oracle system because they're too easily stolen. They're not secure. Instead, we'll have biometric authentication that just recognizes you and logs you in based on that. Much easier to do and much safer.
Yeah, for somebody who spends half his life looking for my last password, that'll be a very That would be a very welcome addition, Larry.
We all hate passwords.
That's right.
They're
It's the
inconvenient to use, and they're less secure. The more complicated the password, the less secure the password is, because the more complicated it gets, everyone writes it down.
Exactly. Exactly. No, it's definitely taken civilization backwards. There's no doubt about that. So I think there's an interesting, almost a semantic issue, because we've had EHRs, we call them EHRs, and they were and have historically been a place where you log the data. There's a bit of billing stuff on the side, but basically it's just a repository of data. But what you are trying to build isn't really an EHR. It's a kind of intelligent brain for a healthcare system that is actually helping to orchestrate, helping the people in the system to make the best possible decisions, and soaking up data, which isn't just the pure stuff that happens in the clinic, it's all the other stuff.
It's a clinical information and care management system,
yeah.
is what it is. And by the way, integrated right into this system is a clinical trial system.
Yeah, exactly.
So if a hospital, one of the UK hospitals wants to run a clinical trial, the typical thing was, and I know because the two leaders in clinical trial software are Metadata and Oracle. So we made this clinical trial software. And there shouldn't be a separate market for clinical trial software. The clinical trials are run primarily in hospitals, and primarily research university hospitals, which is actually a problem, because we don't get a very diverse demographic from that. It's usually university hospitals in the Western world, North America, Western Europe, and that. Now, because the clinical trial system, trying new drugs, is really just trying out new drugs. We know what it is. It's trying out new drugs on some number of patients and seeing if the drug is A, safe, and B, works. And we can do that through a traditional, double-blind, placebo-based test, or a more advanced challenge trial. All of that stuff is built into the new Oracle Health system. And hospitals, we can start clinical trials in 48 hours. Usually it's 6 months, 4 to 6 months to start a clinical trial. And the biggest burden on running a clinical trial is actually recruiting the patients into the clinical trial. Now that we have all the patient data in a unified database, not only can we recruit the patients much faster, we're recruiting the right patients. We look at the patients that would most benefit from the new drug, and the patients that will, and a cross-section of different kinds of patients that will tell us the most as a result of the trial. We'll get the most information as a result of the trial. It will thoroughly test safety and thoroughly test efficacy. And we can do that with the flip of a switch. Oracle ran all the clinical trials pretty much, and did all the recruiting for the clinical trials for COVID-19. And we were under tremendous time pressure, and it was very clear to us during COVID that our medical systems were not up to the job.
So the other crucial bit of the clinical trial piece, though, is the ability to have trials that never end, which I think is a really crucial piece, because we put people on a trial, you wait 3 years to get a result, send the results usually in the back of a lorry to the FDA.
Yeah. Oh my God, yeah. Yeah. The result, when you finish a clinical trial, they want you to print out the data and then send it to the FDA or the MHRA. And I just couldn't, you want us to do what? It's all in a database right now, all the data, and you can, and we have all the analytics attached to the database, and you can now do any statistical analysis you want for toxicity and efficacy and all this other stuff. Said, no, print it out. You must be kidding, but they're not kidding. So the new system, and this is what you and I have been referring to as Musk's Law. When we tackle the medical problem, where does the medical problem begin and the medical problem end? So Cerner really automated hospitals. The other big company, healthcare company in the United States, Epic, automates hospitals.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, that's not the whole medical world. There are all the pharmaceutical companies, all the medical device companies, that are both highly regulated. There are the government regulators. There are international regulators. So there's the FDA. There's World Health Organization, and there are all the payers. And you have, before you can prescribe something, you have to make sure you're going to be reimbursed. So you got to get it pre-approved. We need to automate all of that. So back to this with the FDA. If we're doing a clinical trial, we need to ship to the FDA not a truckload of paper, but instead just a logon ID where they can look at all of the data. And with all of the data, we have the basic set of statistics for efficacy and safety, but also give them a workbench where they can run any statistical packages they want to delve more deeply into the results. And they can analyze it any way they want to, but they can do that very, very quickly. They can, whenever they have people available, it's a matter of, I don't know, days, a few weeks for them to thoroughly analyze whether this drug is safe and whether this drug works, as opposed to months or years. And I mean, clinical trials are sometimes measured in billions of dollars in years. This makes no sense whatsoever. It's why so many pharma companies have so few new therapeutics. It's a big problem. Every diagnostic device should automatically put the results of the results, whether it's a simple blood test or it's a CT scan or an MRI scan or whatever it is, those results should go directly into your EHR, where the doctor can see it immediately, or whoever, where the patient can see it immediately. Another thing is you've got to connect the patients to their caregivers. So there's got to be a patient portal where the patient can look at their latest. Let's say you just one of your kids wasn't feeling well. You take them in. They use the bioMérieux Spotfire. They run a respiratory panel on 25 common respiratory pathogens. The influenza A, influenza B, COVID, rhinovirus, blah blah, all of them, and you get a result. And my wife takes one of our kids in, and she should get that result on her smartphone as soon as it comes off the Spotfire. That's the way it should work. She and the doctor immediately finds out, okay, Eli doesn't have any of these. Okay, he's good. We don't know what it is, but it's nothing. It's none of these serious pathogens that we need to worry about. That's the way it should work. So it's payers. It's all the public health officials need to look at the aggregate data of all the patients and all the doctors. Remember during COVID, we sent a ship to New York City because we thought we were running out of hospital beds in New York City. So we sent this big Navy ship to New York City because we thought we were running out of hospital. We weren't. But nobody knew. Nobody had the slightest idea. We were very involved, again, in the clinical trials for COVID and actually once the vaccine was developed and actually scheduling the delivery of the vaccine to many different places where people would be vaccinated, keeping track, and then on a voluntary opt-in basis, we would keep track of all the patients who were vaccinated, including whether they had any side effects like just injection site swelling or low-grade fever, or in some cases something very serious like blood clots. And we tracked that with an application we built called vSafe. But there were no, and that was a population level system. There were no population level systems. All of the population data was 6 to 9 months out of date. We had no idea how many hospital beds we had available. We had no idea how many people had contracted COVID-19 over the last few days. We had no idea how many people had been intubated, how many respirators we had available. We knew nothing. We were flying blind the whole time.
And I think one of the things that emerged from that, and also from the ability to go back and tap real-time healthcare data, is that the balance in trials between what you have to do up front before an approval and what information you gain after an approval in a real world setting, that balance, I think, may be fundamentally changed now.
Well, there's a lot of crazy things in the world, right? But one of my things I like to put on the list is completely crazy. So for COVID-19, we tested 5,000 patients, for the Pfizer vaccine. It's a cohort of 5,000 patients. Is it safe? Does it work? And then after the clinical trial was over, like all clinical trials, we stopped gathering data. Let me get this straight. We gathered data for 5,000 people, and now we're going to inject hundreds of millions of people with this vaccine, but we're not going to gather data on the hundreds of millions because we're really very comfortable with the 5,000 tells us all we need to know? What are you talking about? That's madness. A clinical trial should never end. In fact, just the opposite. If a drug is approved, of course you keep gathering the data on approved drugs. That's insane. And I'll tell you a funny story. So I mentioned the V-Safe system that we built for the government, where we did, on an opt-in basis, let patients voluntarily report after they were vaccinated. Yes, I was vaccinated. I got the first shot, and then we sent out reminders for this when they get their second shot. All of this other stuff, and we did discover some very serious side effects. We did discover these blood clots, and the government found one particular vaccine that will remain unnamed, but it's funny. You'll see why it remains unnamed, because it was so silly. One particular vaccine that women were getting blood clots, about 1 in 800,000 were getting blood clots, so they wanted to pull the vaccine off the market. Yeah. And we went into our system and said, I don't think that's a really good idea, because the best vaccine, the women are getting blood clots in 1 out of 900,000 rather than 1 out of 800,000. And this is completely crazy. And by the way, they don't get the blood clots if they take an aspirin. And we had all of that data. They were going to pull vaccine off. They were really going to pull the vaccine off the market. This is called real-world data. It's not a clinical trial, but it's data we got because we didn't stop gathering data when the clinical trial ended. Now I'll tell you another funny story on the same thing. The clinical trial was run. I think what was the age limit? Was it 12 years old or 14 years old? I can't remember what the age cutoff was. You had to be over, I'm going to make up the number. I think it's 14. I'm close, I'm fairly close. And pregnant women were not allowed to get the vaccine. They were not included in the clinical trial. They considered that too dangerous to include pregnant women in the clinical trial. But we included a lot of pregnant women in the clinical trial because it turns out not all pregnant women know they're pregnant. Imagine that. And so a bunch of pregnant women got the vaccine and had no adverse effects. We couldn't distinguish between someone who's pregnant and someone who's not pregnant. And we were of the opinion there are so many young women in the front lines of healthcare and treating COVID-19 patients that was a very bad decision not to allow them to get vaccinated if they wanted to get vaccinated. Because clearly it was safe. And there was this pretty big fight about, no, if you want to have pregnant women get the vaccine, you're going to have to run a clinical trial with a double-blind, placebo-based, blah-blah clinical trial. I said, we've already run a challenge study. We've already got we got million, run a clinical trial on 1,000 people rather than how about 100 million people where we have the data. That is far more persuasive statistically. And the regulators were not comfortable in doing something that was out of bounds. They were not used to doing, which is a double-blind, placebo-based clinical trial. We don't have time to do that. I'm sorry, we have to approve this. Anyway, much to their credit, after extended discussions, they said, you're right. We're going to go ahead and approve it for pregnant women. And but that's how it should always work, because we approve a drug, you should keep gathering the data, and then another famous one, which is an awful lot of cancer drugs are used off-label. Okay, this has been found to be useful for lung cancer, and some doc tried it at Memorial Sloan Kettering for kidney cancer, got a good outcome. Yeah. If we should be gathering all of that data on that cancer drug, and if we find it is efficacious for other cancers, we know it's safe. If we find it's efficacious for other cancers, it should get approved, which means that insurance will reimburse you, or the government will reimburse you. We need to constantly be collecting that data rather than it being anecdotal. So this universal system, clinical trials never end. All of your medical data is in one place where, in the case of an emergency, we can find it immediately. But also, just in case of you seeing a new doc, you don't have to fill out those crazy forms in the waiting room. You just say who you are, and they have all that data about you, and the doc you visit for the first time has all that data about you, and makes much better, much more informed decisions when they make recommendations as far as whatever treatment you may get.
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity, and it actually turns out to be a huge opportunity for regulators as well, because if they think about it, they might well say access for patients to new drugs is important, so we want to make it, first of all, we want to make sure they're safe, but often you don't get safety data until many years after you've licensed the drug. So why don't we migrate the approval a bit earlier, and then use real-world evidence to actually demonstrate safety over the next decade or whatever. I mean, that's probably the best way for them to do it. And I think they're beginning to think about that. Regulators are by definition pretty conservative, but I think they are now starting to think about how they make that work a bit better.
Absolutely. And the thing that you've been talking to me about and promoting really has been your vision on preventative medicine. As we'll just take the UK as an interesting example, because there you have it's a single payer system, and the best way to get better outcomes is to just have earlier detection, but earlier detection with earlier therapies. Just early detection by itself is nothing. Okay, you have diabetes, and what should I do about it? I have no idea. But I just thought I'd tell you. That's not helpful. But it's actually not uncommon. Detection without available therapeutics. Now there are these new generation of siRNA drugs and these new diagnostic tests. Normally, how do you know you have high blood pressure? Well, that's easy. You go in and they put a blood pressure cuff on you, and your blood pressure is too high. Okay. Well, yeah. Well, we've been doing that for, I don't know, a couple hundred years. We've made any progress on that? Yeah, we now can tell by looking with blood tests and looking at biomarkers to say, okay, you're not manifesting the high blood pressure, but you actually do have episodes of high blood pressure, and you are vulnerable to cardiovascular disease and high blood pressure. And you should, rather than waiting for it to manifest actually in you as an individual, we should start with a low dose treatment on high blood pressure now, and we probably should get you on a statin right now, a cholesterol reducing drug right now. And rather than having to take these pills once or twice a day, where compliance is a real problem, especially if you don't have symptoms. Right?
Exactly.
You're 35, I don't have symptoms, they want me to take these pills. Forget it. But instead, you can get an injection that will deal with cholesterol and deal with high blood pressure, and it's one injection a year with these siRNA drugs, short interfering RNA, and where your body basically makes the drug, if you will, or shuts down the manufacture of some protein in your body. With those kinds of therapeutics and the population health data to back it up, and we start trying that, I think we'll see that people, I'm quite confident if we do that, if the interventions are earlier, we will have healthier populations that have a longer lifespan and a longer health span, and a much higher quality of life, better outcomes, and lower costs to the healthcare system, to the taxpayer. So everyone benefits from this, and I think that is the future of population health.
Yeah. And I think you're right, Larry. I think there is going to be a significant shift in where.
By the way, I'm right because you told me.
That's right. He's a good tutorial. He does.
I listen.
He listens. But I think the opportunity is huge in this space. And as you say, we've got these new therapeutics, including the GLPs, so that's interesting, and the siRNAs. But we've also got AI now that's going to be able to help us predict what's likely to get you and what isn't likely to get you. So you can focus on those things in a prevention mode before you ever have symptoms, which is clearly the direction of travel. And of course, that all has to be hooked up by a digital backbone, which is where Oracle comes in. Because, having it linked up so the data actually ends up in the record along with all the other data is going to be crucial.
Yeah, well, as we introduce these siRNA drugs and when we start treating people for high blood pressure, let's say at 35 versus 45 or 50 when it manifests itself, we will have all of that data and all of that population data available to regulators. They don't have any of that right now. Yeah. And this is going to be transformative. Much better information is going to be available. Then that information will be inspected by the aggregate information, not individual health records, but these aggregates, these anonymized aggregates, will be inspected by AI. And the regulators and the government, the public health officials will be making much better decisions as per public health as to, yes, we should pay for these siRNA drugs on a certain part of the population, because in the end, we get much better outcomes, and better outcomes always cost less. They always cost less. You keep someone out of a hospital, no one wants to go to hospital. The patient's much happier, and so are the taxpayers.
And now what's interesting is that when you start to think about these, what is essentially an epidemic of these chronic diseases that's occurring in middle to late life, and you've got the tools to prevent them, flatten that morbidity, not only does it make healthcare systems more efficient, but it keeps people in work. It's important for productivity.
Yes.
It's important for GDP growth.
Absolutely.
That you can get the attention of finance ministers if you talk about that.
No, absolutely. It's just a huge win across the board.
Everybody wins, and we've now got the tools. But a crucial bit of that will be the ability to digitize the information chain so that everybody knows what's going on.
And we have to have the data to prove to patients that yes, I should. It does look I'd be better off taking the siRNA drugs. It's easy compliance. I get one shot a year, and I'm going to live longer and be healthier for a much longer period of time. So we have to convince the people. We have to convince the regulators. Yeah. And I think with these new systems, we will have that data and it will be available. We can look at all the data that was floating around during COVID-19. I will not comment on some of the data that was floating around during COVID-19, but it wasn't all accurate.
Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise. But a lot of data that we really wanted was missing. We have to have good and accurate data available. That's the best answer to people are very concerned, okay, I want to stop publishing misinformation, which is a good thing. But the best antidote to misinformation is information, and good information. And one of the reasons there was so much misinformation floating around during COVID-19, because we were absent good, useful information. We didn't know. And that's when people start making stuff up.
So to get back, Larry, to the development, the software engineering that's allowed you to develop this health information system, broadly defined, I assume that AI, first of all, AI must have played a role in the design because we're in a different world now, and actually it's changing pretty quickly.
It is indeed.
So the ability to actually, use AI to help design it, but also design it so it can utilize AI more effectively. Talk to us about that, because that's a really interesting new paradigm.
It is so extraordinary. I remember I gave a speech maybe a year and a half ago where I asked the question, is AI the most important new technology ever? And I said, maybe. We're going to find out pretty soon. Well, I think we found out. We're on the cusp of finding out. And the answer is more likely yes than no. And the system we wrote, Cerner took about 25 years to write their existing hospital automation system. Same case, Epic, about 25 years. We have completely rewritten that system in 14 months. Now, how is that possible? Well, we must not have done a very good job, because you can't do 25 years worth of work in 14 months. Well, we wrote it in this programming language called Apex, which is an application generator. In other words, we generate human beings kind of say what they want the application to do, but then AI generates the application itself. So we used AI to build the application. Yeah. The application itself was also chock full of AI. I mentioned once, just the first thing you do, log on, it just looks at you, recognizes you, and no passwords, and all of that, facial recognition, index, whatever biometric you want to use, index finger, face, voice, whatever you want. Then that's AI. The doctor, before they meet the patient, you get a summary of the electronic health records, your recent vitals, your recent lab tests, all of that stuff is all generated by AI. The interface, show me Larry Ellison's latest X-rays, all AI. So the application was built using AI tools, AI IT tools, and then the application itself is filled with AI agents, what are called AI agents, that summarize the patient before the doc sees the patient, that listens to the consultation between the doc and the patient, updates the electronic health record, makes okay, I'll say it, get myself in trouble, makes kind of clinical recommendations in the form of saying what docs have had success with with therapeutics and with similar patients. It does all of that. All of your data is in a single place. It's all unified. You have, in fact, all of the country's data is in a single place. It's unified. Population health. We built something much bigger than. It's not that we rebuilt Cerner. We built something dramatically bigger. Again, population health, clinical trials. Population health, not in Cerner. Clinical trials, not in Cerner. Challenge studies, not in Cerner. Payer pre-authorization, not in Cerner. We not only rebuilt everything Cerner had, but we added an additional chunk of code that was as big as all of Cerner's. We were like double Cerner in 14 months because of these new AI tools. And we did it with a fairly small, brilliant team. I think some of you I see you in the audience, so okay. I don't normally say this in private when we're together by ourselves, but I confess you guys are pretty good. And I use guys in the generic. I get myself in trouble in the generic sense. We have a lot of the docs are not classically guys. Right? They have long hair. Anyway, now I'm getting myself in a lot of trouble. A lot of women and men on the project have done all of them brilliant. All of them having done absolutely an extraordinary job. There's no way you build something like this in 14 months. It's impossible. Yeah, using conventional software technology, the team would be thousands of people doing it over a period of many years. This was hundreds of people. Actually, I don't even know how many people are on New Millennium. Can anyone just shout out the number? Programmers on New Millennium? 500 on New Millennium. Thank you. Saw you. Right in the front row. Okay, 500 people on New Millennium. To give you an idea on Fusion, Fusion, which is one of our, it's called an ERP suite. We have, 4,000 people on Fusion? 5,000 people on Fusion. It's 1/10 the number of people in a tiny fraction. And Fusion took us, well, I don't know, 6 years to build, 6 years to build before it was kind of in good shape. This is simply astonishing. And the application is so and Fusion doesn't have a voice interface. You know, I mean, Fusion has a bunch of AI agents that we've added recently, but this team with modern tools, modern technology, was able to build something that would have been inconceivable just a few years ago.
And I think what's remarkable about it is that it sort of landed at exactly the right time, because the wealth of data that we can populate that with, if you think about the genomic data that's now emerging in the clinic and elsewhere, I mean, it's just crazy.
Wow.
And so you really do have to have a system that can accommodate that, hold it, and manage it.
Here's a little more craziness. What happens? You pay for one of these really expensive Siemens, the high-res Siemens scan. You get all of this data, right? And we know data is the first step in AI. You have to collect all the data and then use the data for AI training. So you take all this Siemens scan data, and the docs go into a room, with all the screens, right? Because I've been in the room with them, and they're looking at me, and they didn't know it was me they were looking at. So, and they're making comments about, like, well, that doesn't sound good. I'm saying, anyway. I say, hey guys, I want to let you know that I'm the patient. Be careful what you say. You're hurting my feelings. After the docs finish looking at this, they throw the data away. It was considered, in fact, it probably still is considered. There's so much data when you do many slice CT scan that data, if you stored it, it was too expensive to store. Au contraire, we'll store it for free. Thank you. Anyone wants to give us all their scanner data? We will not charge you a dime. That data is so precious in training AI to, and by the way, the slide biopsy data, MRI data, we don't even, interesting, there is no sonogram data. It just shows up on a screen. It's not there. There's no digital form of that. It's ridiculous. If you watch someone looking at a fetus on a sonogram, and they're measuring the development of the skull and the length of the spinal cord, you cannot measure a 3D object with a 2D ruler, okay, on a screen. You can't do that. Okay, it's an interesting approximation. But, oh my God. I mean, the computer should be doing all of this for you. It should be recorded. The computer should be helping you detect whether the umbilical cord is wrapped around the fetus's neck, or there's a knot in the umbilical cord, or something like that. Computers are way better than the sonogram text or a doc, because the resolution of the sonogram, it's really hard to read. I'm staring at this thing and trying to figure it out, and then the text tells me that's the head. Well, I had found that at least, and then I found the head in the spinal cord, and then I was lost after that. The computers can do all of this automatically. We need to save the information. If a doc missed something like a knot in the umbilical, we need to figure that out. We need to train the AI that always finds the knot in the umbilical cord. A lot of we can do this dramatically better. We've got to save all this diagnostic data, use it to train AI. The AI will then assist in the diagnostic. We'll look at the biopsy slides. AI is getting very good at looking at biopsy slides and finding early onset cancers that docs themselves can't do just visually. All of that is happening as we speak. And over the next few years, this is going to get dramatically better, and we're all going to benefit.
And I also think, well, it's been interesting watching this space for the last 20 years, actually, because various tech companies have sort of said, I remember when Verily said, well, we're going to make an EHR system. That lasted about 20 minutes, and that was the end of that. Microsoft has been talked about it, but never really done anything. And what's interesting is that now that Oracle's clearly firmly in place, it's not, as you said, it's not just an EHR system, but it's got the capability of the cloud and substantial databasing and AI capabilities. Yeah. So it's a stack of capabilities, not just an EHR system that runs on their hospital server, which is a massively advantageous position.
Yeah, it's completely different.
Yeah.
You have to go back to when the banks didn't share their data and there wasn't this global credit card database. Then the scam was just keep getting more and more credit cards. And you just keep on applying. You had like 100 credit cards and you could buy an awful lot of stuff on credit. And the bank said, well, that's not good. We're going to have to share and the banks were reluctant to share their data. But finally, they realized they could reduce fraud and reduce losses by sharing the data, which they did. And then consumers figured out that was great because then they could get these things called credit cards.
Exactly.
And they could get these very short-term loans, and they could buy Nikes on Tuesday when they didn't get paid till Friday. And everyone was pretty happy. Losses went down. People got easy loans with their credit cards. But then we got this global database. But the fact that we had it for credit, didn't have it for healthcare.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Crazy.
Crazy, crazy. So, Larry, you and I have spent a lot of the summer thinking about innovation across multiple different domains, including healthcare, and what are the best ways to propagate and develop highly innovative science and engineering that will deliver real benefits to the globe. It'd be really interesting to get you to just talk a little bit about your thinking about that, because I have to say my thinking has evolved a lot in conversations with you, and you've obviously put a lot of thought into what does it take to really create a highly creative, highly innovative engine that will ultimately, hopefully, pop out solutions.
Yeah. Well, I think, again, my dear friend Elon Musk and watching him work and what I learned,
yeah.
And of course we distilled that down to Musk's law.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can tackle some gigantic problems if you step back, go back to first principles, and say, well, where does the problem begin and where does the problem end? And for electric cars, for example, if he didn't think about, you want to build electric cars, ultimately to be successful, a couple of things are true. You have to build a worldwide network of charging stations. The United States tried. The United States government recently tried. Maybe they built 5 charging stations. Elon had to do that on his own all over the world if you want to sell cars all over the world. And he did.
Yeah.
And he did. Mind-boggling. If he was going to be successful building cars, electric cars, there weren't, if he used, when he started Tesla, if he used every battery on Earth that was made on Earth the following year, in other words, there were no more flashlights, there were no more portable computers, there were no more hearing aids, there was nothing. He'd got all the batteries on Earth. There were no more car batteries, he took them all. There weren't enough batteries to support a car business. He had to double the battery output of the planet Earth every year for the next several years to be successful. How about that? Just before he started, there just aren't enough batteries. Okay, so I got to double. So what do you mean? So I got to improve the quality. I got to change the battery chemistry. I got to change the battery chemistry and make it better. And then I have to build these automated plants that build batteries as well as cars. Because actually designing and building an electric car is quite easy. But that's not the problem. Rivian designed and built an electric car. Fisker designed and built an electric car. A lot of people designed and built electric cars. And they could build hundreds of them. But the problem is, if you want to be a car company, you got to build millions of them every year, not hundreds. And therefore you need to build huge numbers of batteries. You have to build giant factories to build the cars. The factories are filled with robots. You have to write all the software for all the robots. You can't use conventional steel. You have to develop new alloys of steel. And if you want the cars to be robotic, self-driving cars, you have to solve one of the most difficult AI problems there is. I can keep going.
No, but it's, I mean.
Look at all the stuff. So, all right. So that's what Elon did with electric cars and energy. So we said, okay, let's look at that. Look at all the different problems he had to solve. Well, medicine's a big one. We're doing that. When we're applying Musk's law to medicine, it's payers, providers, device manufacturers, pharmaceutical manufacturers, hospitals, clinics, all governments, all of the above. You got to solve all those areas. You got to modernize the FDA, the MHRA, all of it. That's what you got to do. And that's the scope of the problem, end to end. So what about this thing called food supply? You know, transportation gets kind of a bad rap for producing a lot of greenhouse gases. But the biggest producer of greenhouse gases is the food supply, by far, is agriculture. And who's taken a close look about modernizing agriculture? Yeah. And we went back on first principles and said we need to do a couple of things. One is we looked at growing inside. You use 95% less water growing inside. That's good because water actually, we don't talk about it a lot now, but water is a very precious commodity and we are running out of fresh water. In fact, we will run out of fresh water long before we run out of natural gas. So food supply, a lot of people don't believe that, but I promise you I can give you the data if you want to stay an extra hour, which no one does. So growing inside is part of the solution to the problem. So we're designing these next generation greenhouses. You use much less land, which means you don't have to steal animal habitat in Africa. You don't have to burn down the Amazon rainforest and turn that into farmland. We have plenty of land to grow. That is not the problem. Because we don't need to use any more land than we're currently using. But there's a bunch of land that we're not currently using. Wouldn't it be nice if maize, otherwise known as corn, could grow in the desert? Well, it can. You just have to make a few changes. To maize, you have to make it, there are drought-resistant plants. You can engineer maize to be more nutritious and drought-resistant, so you can grow in the desert. You can engineer maize to not require fertilizer. You just have to give it the same attribute as soybeans where they get their nitrogen from the atmosphere. So you tell me you can grow it in the desert and not have to fertilize it? Yeah, well, I'm not done yet. You know, most of maize, the corn, they only eat the kernels, right? And the rest of it, the cob, they don't eat, and the stalk and all of that, and the root system, they don't eat. Well, what if the maize was just, capturing vast amounts of CO2 out of the atmosphere, and you look at how much maize we grow every year, it's like every year we grow 5 new Amazon rainforests with just maize. Yeah. What if we had altered maize so it captured more CO2 and took huge amounts of CO2 out of the atmosphere? And we could, if there is a system of carbon credits, people could, like Microsoft and Oracle, who are building data centers that use power, could buy its carbon offsets from Kenya, who's growing maize. Yeah. So we'll pay the farmers in Kenya their carbon offsets if they're using this carbon capture maize. So they don't have to buy fertilizer. They'll get money from us to buy seed stock and the rest. They will prosper, and we will get our carbon offsets from the most effective next generation carbon capture system, which isn't one of these huge mechanical contraptions. I'm not going to say any contraption is kind of a neutral word. Huge expensive mechanical contraptions, which is really not a terribly efficient form of carbon capture. But we can use biology for carbon capture, so we can solve a bunch of problems. Since agriculture is a huge contributor to greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, why can't we make a few changes where it is just the opposite? It gets to net zero in greenhouse gases, just in the agriculture business. The farmers can sell their carbon offsets. Yes, it is true the climate is changing. The first place the climate change is going to seriously hit, it's already hitting it, is the Horn of Africa, Somalia, Ethiopia. Their country is getting more arid every year. And if we're not careful, if we don't pay attention, there's going to be a famine in the Horn of Africa. And that famine will completely destabilize Europe, because there'll be a mass migration of people from the Horn of Africa to Europe. There's no place else for them to go. We cannot allow this to happen. From a moral standpoint, from a geopolitical standpoint, we can't let this happen, but we can prevent it by deploying the latest technology, latest biotechnology, and have high quality food, even though the climate is changing, and plenty of it, even though the climate is changing. We know how to do that. We know how to do that, and it's something, if Elon could land that rocket, and he did, and we all saw it, we should be able to have a better, if he can do that with rockets, we should be able to do what we plan to do with maize. And maybe it won't be quite as cool. Well, I think actually a field of corn growing in the desert in Ethiopia, pretty cool, pretty cool. Maybe still not quite as charismatic as the rocket landing, but maybe more consequential.
So, Larry, I think one of the things, and it's been great working with you on this project over the last year or so, it's hard, despite the fact that the world's got a whole set of challenging issues, there's no doubt about that, but it's hard not to be optimistic about the power of science, innovation, and engineering, and the way you can use
It's the life we chose, JB.
That's right. And actually, I do think great credit to you and your team from Oracle here, because, you know, we're living this in real time, because you have transformed the way we think about data, healthcare, disease, and how we manage it. So, you know, it does show the power of engineering and innovation in terms of changing the way the world works. So many congratulations to you. It's been terrific.
Well, thank you. I like you, remain optimistic and excited and highly motivated as we tackle these huge problems. I can't think of a better way to live a life.
Yeah, exactly. No, thanks very much, Larry. Terrific.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you. Thank you.
Please welcome